Bedtime Stories from Sleep With Me is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Friends beyond the binary, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time for the podcast that never goes anywhere but is always going. It's time for the podcaster who really doesn't know what he's talking about, but eventually you'll say, in the best way possible. But if you're a new listener, that may not sound attractive. Does this sound attractive to you? A podcast you just barely need to listen to or don't need to listen to at all or could listen. A podcaster that'll be here to keep you company and take your mind off of stuff, but not really put you to sleep and not really, just barely entertain you, maybe put you to sleep. These are the things people love about this show, but it does take some getting used to. So if you're new, give it a few tries because you deserve a good night's sleep. Even if you never listen to this podcast again, check out sleepwithmepodcast.com/no thank you. That's got other sleepy stuff on there. Because even if you don't like me or the show, you still deserve a good night's sleep. You still deserve a bedtime you could look forward to. We know how it feels, myself and a lot of the other people listening. While we might not have gone through whatever's keeping you awake, we can relate to some of the feelings in the deep, dark night. So what's going to happen is there's going to be support for the show. That's how we get to be free twice a week. Then there'll be a long, meandering intro that's kind of a show within a show meant to ease you into bedtime. And then there'll be, other stuff coming up from there, bedtime story and stuff like that. All to keep you company while you fall asleep. I'm so glad you're here. Like I said, give it a few tries, see how it goes. I'm here to help and keep you company. And it's time for Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. And these sponsors are how we're able to do this for free twice a week. All right, everybody, this is one of these famous tales that's never been told before, but I thought I should look up some facts just to, this is like this tale called The World's Loudest Stenographer, and I just wanted to look up, make sure I had some of my facts straight, even though I already know the story. Is like a stenographer, and just make sure that you all knew that. So this is from maybe I should just look it up on Wikipedia. So Wikipedia comes under stenotype, stenotype. A stenotype, a steno machine or stenotype machine, shorthand machine, stenograph, or steno writer. It's a specialized corded keyboard or typewriter used by stenographers for shorthand use. In order to pass the U.S. registered professional reporter test, a trained person must write speeds of approximately 180, 200, and 225 words per minute at very high accuracy. Some stenographers can reach words of 300 per minute, and the website has an official record for American English at 375 words a minute. Now, just this is the keyboards, stenotype or stenotype. You say steno, I say stenopad. Stenopad. No, it's a stenopad. It has far fewer keys than a conventional alphanumeric keyboard. Multiple keys are pressed simultaneously, known as chording or stroking. This is stuff I didn't actually notice. Spell out whole syllables, words, and phrases with a single hand motion. And this makes real-time transcription practical for certain situations because the keyboard does not contain all the letters of the English alphabet. Letter combinations are substituted for the missing letters. And there are several schools of thought on how to record various sounds, such as StenEd, Phoenix, and Magnum Steno theories. First shorthand machine, stenotype wasn't used for 80 years or more, was a punched paper strip built in 1830. The first machine was 1863, but actual use was 1880 in Italy. In the U.S., 1875, there was a patent filed, and then in 1879, the shorthand machine, and 1909 in France, and the most related to today's stenotype or stenotype was created by Wardstone, Ireland in 1913, and stenotype was applied to the machine. And modern hardware, there's modern keyboards that have more in common with computers than they do with typewriters or QWERTY computer keyboards. And most contain microprocessors that allow sensitivity adjustments. So this isn't so important because this is an older tale. There's many steno enthusiasts are making and selling keyboards designed for use with Plover, an open source steno software. And there's a few different ones like those. There's also maps of the keyboard layout and describing home position. Steno paper has become almost obsolete with the advancement in paperless stenotype machines. When it's used, though, steno paper comes out of a stenotype machine at the rate of 1 row per chord, with the pressed letters printed out in 22 columns corresponding to 22 keys. Don't know if I understand that. And there's even a chord chart for consonants and vowels, final consonants, punctuation. Let's see what else we have here. Cover a little bit of shorthand really quick. Shorthand is abbreviated symbolic writing method. That's what I always idea of a stenopad. When I would see them around my house, I don't know. I guess my dad maybe took notes in them sometimes. They were not written in shorthand though. It increases speed and brevity of writing compared to longhand. It's a more common method of writing a language. Longhand is? The process of writing shorthand is called stenography from the Greek stenos, narrow, and graphene, to write. Narrow writing, not shorthand. Give me a little narrow write, eh? It's also been called brachys, brachography and tachography from Greek, short or swift. So fast writing, that's what I do. Actually, I don't write fast. Even when I'm trying to, I don't. And there's a variety of 19th century systems. Many forms of shorthand exist according to Wikipedia. It provides symbols or abbreviations for words and common phrases, which can allow someone well trained in the system to write quickly as people speak. Abbreviation methods are alphabet based and use different. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misusing stenographer in this case. Of course, the world's loudest stenographer. And this was a famous case. It didn't, again, these are tales rarely told. And this was actually one of the times I actually helped. I don't want to brag because, this stuff, I'm not even supposed to make it public information. But there was there's times, mostly it's involved the trick-or-treat season and Lady Witchbeard. But if you're new, I do have other jobs other than making a sleep podcast, though I'd call this a pastime at this point. And there's this one bed and breakfast. And I've pitched this actually to other hotels and other companies, but normally, like, I'm laughing. They undervalue things so greatly, which is weird because they pay for like video production and video editing and stuff. But like when you tell them, hey, this is what I would consider reasonable compensation, they say, well, we were thinking like you just get a free hotel room for one night. And they'd say, well, it takes me like no, thank you. Maybe no, thank you. Or they say, well, how about 2 nights, maybe 3? And I say, okay, that like, thank you for your time. I mean, I say, appreciate it very much. But this is actually different because this is a bed and breakfast. Now, still in the history of the podcast, haven't had really very many bed and breakfast situations other than this one. Trying to think if I stayed at a bed and breakfast for a wedding or 2 weddings maybe. So, okay. But so there's a bed and breakfast, and it's run by a couple, and they used to hire me in the early days of the podcast because I was like, well, I was supporting the podcast with my, my day job and then this hobby, mostly my day job, but this bed and breakfast, they said, hey, why don't you come out here? We have a very unique clientele. And normally it's different than a normal bed and breakfast that's usually couples. They said most of our clientele are individual beings. And they're actually coming for bed and breakfast, like a little R&R, usually multiple nights. And, our clients are confidential. Though I've I've gotten permission when I've, I said, well, this person was famous, for the Monster Mash or whatever, for that song similar to like Lady Witchbeard for one. I mean, well, actually, her real name's Connie, a witch named Connie. That was the first episode Lady Witchbeard was in. Okay, but I'm way off track as usual. So where was that? Lady Witchbeard. So, okay, so there's a bed and breakfast. That's where I was. And they would have me go tell bedtime stories in the vicinity of their clients that were having trouble sleeping. And it worked great. But I slowly found that I had a greater role there. And I would spend time with the clients just as a listener and willing to walk with them in an unofficial capacity as a helper, but not I don't know, I guess similar to a friend would help someone, not like giving them advice or anything, but walking with them and keeping them company. A lot of times they would go, because the other thing about this bed and breakfast, and where the clients did not drive there most of the time, behind this bed and breakfast, well, as usual with most of them, there's like a breakfast, outdoor breakfast area. And then there's some gardens. I'm not sure if you'd classify them as English or Scottish or French or I don't know. And then there's some more water-based gardens. Then there's a duck pond. And there's cottages back there, not on the duck pond, but, in between these different features that you may or may not find in a lot of archetypal bed and breakfast. Of course, yeah, oh boy, the listeners, I'd be remiss if I didn't say yes, there are plenty of doilies and French doors. I don't know what a leaded window is, but, glass doorknobs, that's another thing they have. And that's what I expect to find at a bed and breakfast, French doors at some point, not in my room, obviously, unless I had some sort of balcony situation. Glass doorknob, not necessarily, just to see a glass door, like an associated, guess that's not a requirement. French doors probably are, but I wouldn't even remember. I'd say, were there French doors at that bed and breakfast or not? What was the other thing? And stuff in the back, gardens or something like that, breakfast in a bed. Oh, doilies. There's got to be doilies. Tea cozy, maybe. I don't necessarily have to have a poster bed or a canopy bed, but having one, I would like say you at least have one on site, right? Like in one of the rooms, probably some bed with brass or iron, and trying to think of other things. I mean, I could go. I know there's like a society of inns, because I've seen it and I've checked into places. I could do that, like the Roy G. Biv Institute. Remember, that's another idea that's never gone anywhere, but I'd like it to. All my, one day, all holiday lights will be Roy G. Biv approved. And you say, does that mean they go in Roy G. Biv order? Not necessarily. It means you pay the fee to the Roy G. Biv Institute, and we approve your lights if we approve them. And the fee will help us have the funds to possibly approve your lights certified. Roy G. Biv Institute certified. Also have to pay off. Apparently, there's a Roy G. Biv estate. It was some kid and his family after they watched 3-2-1 Contact at some point. Typical. It was a kid's idea, at least, but now the kid's like I don't even know, like older than me, but they said, could we patent or whatever, copyright Roy G. Biv? And I say, great. But at this point, we've lived long enough that there's probably a Roy G. Biv walking around somewhere. Wouldn't be a Roy because it would be, what about Biv G. Roy? Is there a Roy? Could that be in like season 5? It's me, Biv, Bev and Biv, the Roy twins. They could. I mean, they could just be cousins or something. I'm Bev and Biv, Biv and Bev, the Roy twins. Yeah, we're here to. Maybe I could just invent them. Like that could be like a new podcast. Oh, that's the Roys are fictional? Oh, no. Okay. Oh, okay. So, the bed and breakfast. So behind the duck pond is also like a little nature walk. But if you go out on this nature walk, again, this is private property, so just don't show up there and try because you can't get there anyway. It's a very specific path. But this path connects to the transverse plane, and talked about this, but not in a while. Transverse plane, this was something that I discovered way back, 2013, 2014, before the glory days of multiverses. Before, that became one of the famous, before it really became glorified, the whole multiverse. And I mean, nowadays, everybody says, I think I have a general idea. Maybe I'll watch that graphic again to get a better grasp of multiverse, because I'm still not sure I understand it. But I pretend, everybody pretends they understand what a multiverse is. Transverse plane is two different things. The transverse is... I guess it's different than it's where, the cross, it's a place where I guess multiverses intersect or cross over one another, or that it's easy, they're closely, if they're like some sort of, it's where it's easy to access, so that's the transverse, which I guess is the same as a multiverse. I think it's just an easier way to, like, multiverse means everything, like they're all over the place. But then when you start making them like, oh, there's little tubes, the transverse, you'd say, oh, okay. So I could see that there's they might not be overlapping, but they're within range of another. The transverse plane. So if you go out behind the thing, there's a transverse plane, which just basically means an area you're walking and you can access the transverse plane. Now, the difference between the transverse plane is that there's some other force at work, because it's not like, okay, I want to go to whatever PQV variant 44 and, take a look at the, whatever, beak verse or something like that. This one, it takes you where you need to go. So, and only if you're, like, as far as I know, I don't like to brag, but only if you're accompanied by me. So I would take the the guests to the hotel, and then I would go out for a walk with them, and we would discover via the transverse plane what we need to bring them on their journey. But I guess it was an independent of me, because the guests would also arrive from the transverse plane. And probably they'd be out, somebody would be like, well, there's probably somewhere else. I don't even know. Maybe it's just a country lane that they drive down, and then there's a parking area, and then they come in. But the only reason that's important is that, this was when I was this was not that long ago. I was working at the bed and breakfast. I said, I got to keep my in-person, one day people value, in-person bedtime stories, they realize, okay, you've been making 1,000 episodes. No wonder it costs, money. But so, to do it in person or at a hotel. But so I was like, I got to keep my game on, and it's different, it's not that different doing it in person. I just got to, maintain respectfulness. But these are non-human people normally, or what are we called? The mammals, human, I forgot. I don't know what species we are. Humongous or something? A Homo sapiens. And so I was out there, and they said, we got 2 guests, and they can't get along. They're about to go to some big, presentation in the official capacity. And they're both neither one of them could sleep good. So we need you to help them fall asleep. And I can't talk about that because that's covered by my, understanding of but I can tell you all the other details about them, other than our professional part. And, also the parts where I'm, trying to be sneakily heroic. And again, this is stuff we don't normally hear about except in myths, and it seems a little bit different. So hearing about it in modern day is probably going to be a bit confusing. But the 2 guests, one was what you would say is the keeper of the sun, and the other was the keeper of the moon, or the sun keeper and the moon keeper. But really, that's just a simple title, that one kind of keeps the spirit of the sun and the spirit of the moon. And they also represent the sun or the moon. And, they have different powers or whatever. But apparently, other than Pluto, most of the solar system is drama-free. You don't have things saying, your planet, you're not none of the other planets have to deal with this, except for maybe Neptune or whoever's last, and Uranus being the butt of a bunch of jokes. There's not a lot going on, maybe songs, but that's cool. I'm Venus, I'm your fire. What's your desire? Or others, Saturn, Saturn's rings. Oh boy, are they great? Or, whatever songs, Jupiter. When Jupiter comes out, when something comes out and Mercury comes out at night, come on. So, what was I saying? So you think there's not a lot of drama going on in the solar system except for the natural drama, what we would call interpersonal drama. But just because we're humans doesn't mean that a tendency, that all the human tendencies, maybe a lot of this is about being sentient and conscience, having consciousness versus being a human. Some of this stuff, I would assume, because neither one of these people were human. But I'll refer to them as people because that's kind of how we interacted. And they would remind me, and I've been around enough to know I know very little. They say, okay, well, what do you mean you represent the sun? Who's going to be next? Representative from the Lollipop Guild? And they said, I'm sorry, what? And they said, it's not I can take it without offense. They say, well, it's just beyond your understanding. And separately, and this is public knowledge out there in the world beyond our world, in the transverse plane, wait a second, this might not even have been our sun and the moon. That makes a little more sense to me. Just realized that, but close enough because it was on the other side of the transverse plane. I didn't, interesting. They came here. Could have been, though. But basically, this drama, drama comes up at times, Earth, are we on the back of a turtle or not? News at 11. Who's the center of the universe? But this was more of like, it was a real decision case they were going to make, kind of between the moon and the sun, of vying for dominance in the hearts and minds of people for once and for all. Because I guess at least where this was, the two of them were going back and forth. And I'm not just talking about across the sky, and they got, there's gravitational stuff going on. And, they're doing campaigning, trying to win hearts and minds. And I guess people found it exhausting because they said, I'd like to enjoy you both. Or why, please don't send me, dear son, don't send me any mailers, okay? And just because you didn't mail it doesn't make it a mail. Just because you hung it on my doorknob, soul, do you have soul for soul, whatever it was, don't do it, okay? And that was pretty much the common feeling. So what they decided was they were just going to have a big case, and that a group of their peers would decide, along with, some sort of person with sound judgment, which one was the best. Because that was basically what they're going, well, I'm the best, everybody needs me for warmth. Okay. But that makes me the best because not people desire me. They don't need the moon. They just love the moon. And the sun said, well, and this is so it's just kind of, stuff like that. And people did try to help them work it out. And to figure out okay. And so these two were the representatives of the sun and the moon. And they were so exhausted they couldn't sleep, either one of them, except with a little bit of Scoots' magic. And I really listened to both of them. They seemed like they were going through the same thing. They had great affinity for whoever they represented, and a belief, but not necessarily belief that the sun was the best or the moon was the best. They also both were very concerned with what would happen to them. Their planet, sun's different than, to their client, to their supervisor. What would happen if they, the other one won? And that created some, stress too. And I don't want to make broad statements about celestial beings. There you go. But obviously, they have a heightened version of what you would consider a view of themselves. And they're not always the best listeners. Even the moon, not to us, and or the sun. You'd say, wow. I mean. I don't know who I've told more secrets to, but probably the moon. Okay, the moon won that one, but I wasn't part of this story anyway. But I said, well, what if, who's in charge of this whole thing anyway? And they said, oh, the Celestial Council on, good planetary policy and a couple other groups and the official. And I said, and I said this both of them separate. I said, could you do a request for a change of venue? And they said, why? And I said, maybe some fresh perspective. I said, because this sounds like the system is perpetuating this rivalry. And, what's going to happen is that, other planets that are visible at nighttime or daytime, whoever wins, they're going to think about it too. And then they're going to want to have their chance. And this could just spread across the whole universe. So, and I'm sure there's a lot of benefit from it being I'm sure it's high profile out there. And I said, we could settle it somewhat privately. And they said, okay, what's your plan? And I said, well, okay, you got to have, impartial person and whatever the group of peers. So keep those. But I said, let's find a spot. And then I had to trust the transverse plane. Now, a couple other things to know about the transverse plane is when you first start walking through. So I walked with each one, the moon's representative, the moon keeper and the sun keeper. And we walked, and initially when you go through there, a lot of times it's cotton candy. You go through a cotton candy realm. And that really helped lighten up the mood and talk about trust building, because both of them, they said, this smells like cotton candy. It looks like cotton candy. And I said, it is. And then we had cotton candy fights and ate cotton candy, put it in each other's mouths, made cotton candy, beards and hair, even pretended we were cotton candy barristers and members of parliament. We had a lot of fun with the cotton candy. And eventually we both ended up in a place that I said, well, this could be the place. Because I said the transverse plane has wisdom. So it kind of picked this, which was strange. It was like back when Burger Kings used to have a sunroom. That was I don't know if that was Burger King's answer to the Playland. If it was, sorry for laughing at you, Burger King. But all of a sudden, a while in the 80s, Burger King's had basically you've seen it at people's houses where they say, well, this is our sunroom, our whatever you call it, greenhouse room. Burger King just put them on the front of Burger King's. So you could, especially in the East Coast, so you could pretend you're sitting outside in the winter. Meanwhile, there's we used to throw ashtrays at each other, me and my siblings. So this was basically an old version of that, with the sun. I said, well, what about that sunroom? I said, and then the sun started laughing. I said, okay. It's an area to view the sky. I said, there'll be a good backdrop. And they said, okay. And they said, well, what would be the valuations, because obviously the Council on Planetary Matters and for the good governance of celestial beings or whatever, they have their own standards. They were going to, basically have us do these. I said, nah. And I said, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. And we'll get this all figured out. And I said, the only one other thing you got to agree to is that if we can't reach a consensus decision between the person with sound judgment and the peers, within seven nights of it getting dark outside, I said, I hope the time changes. And I said, just 7/24. I said, I'll set a time equivalent to 7 Earth days. I said, oh, yeah, there won't be any night or day without the moon or the sun. They'll be occupied. And they said, okay, we can get them to agree to that. So they headed off, and I did inform them. I know some of you are like, what's the ethics of being an imaginary interloper or whatever? And I said, yeah, no, I let them know. I said, I'm working on this with the Sunkeeper too and the Moonkeeper. Oh, okay, don't worry. We'll figure, because they all had to agree anyway. And I knew at the time that the key to making all this work was someone named Sanders. And Sanders she was known as the world's loudest stenographer and transcriptionist or whatever, live transcriptionist. And so I got a hold of Sanders. I said, hey, I got something big coming up. I'd met them on the transverse plane too. I'd met Sanders out on the transverse plane. So Sanders said, don't worry, I'll be there. Count on it. And of course, the person with sound, I said, don't worry. This is going to be a thing. So then the first day we did calisthenics, the day one. And, because they all had, they had teams of, obviously, people that went to school for stuff, to experts in everything. And, saying point of order. And I said, actually, I'm in charge of this. And they said, where's the agenda? And I said, the agenda is calisthenics. We're all going to be stretching. We had someone to lead calisthenics. And so we got to get loosened up for the whole day. That's all we did was do calisthenics, then have a break and a snack. Do more calisthenics, had a break and a snack. Then the next day, I said we're gonna go tree climbing. And then everybody said we can't go tree climbing because the sun and the moon aren't out. I said, oh boy, okay, that's. So we can't go tree climbing. Also, it could be awkward for the sun and the moon to tree climb. And, you're bringing your earthly assumptions here. And the whole time, Sanders is when I say the world's loudest transcriptionist, most transcriptionists and stenographers are very quiet. So Sanders is going, yeah, okay. No tree climbing, stuff like that. Then the third day, I said, okay, that's it. Everybody dismissed for the day, adjourned. And I said, I always wanted to say that. Then the third day, I said, okay. No teams. I want to both the sun and the moon, to separately, under your voice, talk about what it might be like if you were the opposite, if you were the sun or the moon. And they said, we're not opposites. And I said, interesting. So you're not opposites, eh? And they said, well, what do you mean under your breath at the same time? I said, okay, how about this? So we'll separate you two. And each one of you will, come up with your own speech about why it's great to be the moon if you're the sun and why it's great to be the sun if you're the moon and what you might think about that. And you'll just do it here with Sanders. And this is where Sanders' power really came in because neither one of them was prepared and they had and I'm not trying to, judge the sun or the moon. But they kind of were relying on their teams. Of course, their team said, and I said, there is no, I said, I object to your objection. You're overruled. So have you listened to any episodes of Sleep With Me? There's always going to be and they said, oh, yeah, we have. We're familiar with those Get Bezos. So the sun and the moon, each had to sit there with Sanders and kind of come up with their idea. But the whole time Sanders was going, okay, yes. And they both got very flustered because they've both felt like, I can't figure out what I'm going to say. Every time I try to say something, they said, can I get another stenographer? I said, I'm sorry, this is the only stenographer we have. This is Sanders. And then, like, that dragged on for a day. But we got it done. It was just like a thought activity anyway, whatever we call it, thought experiment. And then the next day after that, I said, okay, go ahead. Like, you're going to give your own presentation of why you feel like you're the best today. And again, they had to do that every time. They said, well, I'm the sun. I believe I'm the best because, I'm a source of heat and light. And then Sanders would go, heat and light, heat and light. So sometimes, and I don't think Sanders knew, that's the beauty of it, that it's like by repeating it 2 or 3 times, the sun did not, heat and light, because the sun would make a lot of dramatic pauses. And then be like Sanders did it like 4, heat and light, and then underlined it. The sun says, I change with the seasons. I'm there. There's other planets. Provide. Like you got. There's a lot of other unpopular stuff about me that I think is pretty good. I got these solar flares. I can hang up on people's calls if and actually the moon laughed at that. And then the moon went and said, well, I don't provide heat, but I provide light at night. And I provide a way for people to follow some changes in time and season as well. I'm associated with the highlights of seasons. And I'm easier to look at, which I think is important in this discussion. And Sanders said, easy to look at. And the moon just stopped and kind of glared at Sanders. And Sanders actually said, proceed. And the moon stared and said, easy to look at. And then the moon kept staring, easy to look at. The moon was like, are you auditioning for a role or something? Easy to look at. And then the whole court cracked up with that one. And I said, by the way, Sanders, this is just how Sanders works. She doesn't even she's like, just here to take transcriptions of the thing. Like, don't worry about it. And finally what happened was, this was the one thing, they said, well, I can't, they both said, can we just stop, please? Can we have a recess without Sanders here? I said, I'm afraid not. We have to have everything transcribed. I was like, as a matter of fact, I'm thinking about extending this. We're supposed to be done in a few days, but I think we should extend this because you can't, unless we have a record of all these proceedings, how could we ever determine something that's probably indeterminable anyway? And he said, well, you know what? A great idea, the sun and moon. Like, let's stay here. And, just the 3 of us. And then it's the person with the judgment and the peers and your representatives, they can all go home. No reason, if we have a record of all this, everyone else could just review the record and go over it themselves later on, instead of having to sit here with the 3 of us and to work out, a way we're going to determine how we're going to determine something that's probably indeterminable. And then Sanders said, indeterminable. Because I paused, I'm not pausing now because I'm talking to you, my dear listener, and not to the sun and the moon and the gathered representatives. And everyone else was like, that sounds great. Actually, yeah, we'd have a transcription. We're going to have a transcription of everything. And then they said, well, how do we know that Sanders, and then the person with the sound judgment said, Sanders is one of the most recommended stenographers in any layer of the transverse. So don't worry about it. Also, it's being recorded. And And then the sun and the moon started looking, and they made not eye contact, because, they don't have eyes, but they started to kind of say, how did how did all this get started? And I said, great question. How did all this get started anyway? And then Sanders said, how did all this get started anyway? And both the sun and moon said, I don't even remember. I mean, I think it was something about, there was some, bad feelings on an equinox or something. And I said, well, I said, we got to this place where it's like one of you has to be the best. And I guess we got to stay here till it's resolved. Either one of you is the best, or we determined that it's indeterminable. And Sanders said, indeterminable again. And then the sun and the moon looked at each other and they said, indeterminable. And then Sanders said, indeterminable. And the sun and the moon said, indeterminable. No, that's what I said. I said, indeterminable. And then the sun and the moon said, unable to determine. And Sanders said, indeterminable, unable to determine. And they said, yeah, it's not, they said, it's indeterminable. And I said, are you saying that we're not going to ever be able to determine which one of you is better? And they said, correct. And so I said, you have come to the understanding that you're going to withdraw from this competition of who's better, the sun or the moon, and just and be like, yeah, it's not. Sometimes you might have a different preference, but that's not something to be decided here in a way. And they said indeterminable. And then Sanders said that, and then that's how it got determined that it was indeterminable. Maybe, I don't know if it's even the right word. And that's why we still have a sun and a moon, luckily, because holy mackerel. I mean, think about the ramifications we avoided. And it wasn't me. I mean, I know, I'm going to probably get thousands of letters about how, not once again, but occasionally I do something right by a random process or processes, or I get lucky. But in this case, all the credit should go to Sanders. Sanders, she knew what she was doing. She was transcribing. She's the loudest transcriptionist in the world and just had to be herself, and it all worked out. So whether you're sleeping under the sun or the moon, they're both pretty darn great. Good night, everybody. All right, I want to thank everybody who became a patron recently. I want to thank Kevin, Ann, and Tyler. Thanks, good night. Jarita, Jennifer, and Krista. Thanks, and good night. Katie, Ted, and Janine. Thanks, and good night. Anna, Drew, and Rachel. Thanks, and good night. Locke, Janae, and Morgan. Thank you, thanks, good night. Paul, Trent, and Bella. Thank you, thanks, and good night. Kimberly, Shannon, and Esther. Thank you, thanks, and good night. Lau, Carol, and Lou. Thank you, thanks, and good night. Scott, Ella, and Amelia. Thank you, thanks, and good night. Sarah, Nicole, and Vivian. Thank you, thanks, good night. And Antoinette and Eco. Thank you, thanks, and good night. Thanks everybody who supports the show directly on Patreon or supports us on Apple Podcasts or supports the sponsors. That's how we're able to come out for you free twice a week, and really appreciate the support, and tons of other people do too. And, there's great free ways to help the show. Spreading the word, letting people know about the podcast is a great way to do that. Thank you so much. And here's some tuck you in sponsors that enable us to grow all those archives. Thanks and good night.